I wanted to do something different today. I wanted to do something where we look at the playoffs and we look at where teams are. And I wanted to look at how things have gone with playoffs over the last 4 years prior to this one. Now, we look at the standings and what do we talk about? We talk about, well, this team has games in hand. Well, this team's technically further above 500. As I'm recording this, it looks like the Penguins should beat the Rangers. It's 3-2. They get a 3-1 lead. The Rangers come back and they knock that lead down to 1 again. So, I don't know. Rangers doing their best to play spoiler. But when you look at the standings right now, you got Tampa with 92 points in 59 games, which is ridiculous. 500 hockey from here gets them 115 points. Also ridiculous. And means that nobody can catch them. 500 hockey, Tampa's first. So we have no worries about them. And then you got Boston with 76 points in 59 games. Toronto with 75 points in 58 games. So they have that game in hand. 1 point back. The Islanders, 58 games, 76 points. The Capitals, 58 games, 71. So they're 5 points back. 7 points back are Columbus. Columbus has a game in hand, however, on Washington. 69 points in 58 games for Montreal. Their hope of finishing in the top 3 in their division probably faded, but you just never know because these teams are going to play against each other down the stretch. Carolina, of course, right now in until the end of this game when Pittsburgh probably leapfrogs them. So Pittsburgh would get in at 59 games, 69 points. And what's interesting is, when you see these teams right next to each other, and then down here you've got Buffalo with 63 points in 57 games, and the Flyers with 61 points in 58 games. Over the last 4 years prior to this one, 8 out of 8 teams that had the best plus 500 record in the East made the playoffs on this date. And 8 out of 8 who had the best plus 500 record in 2017 made the playoffs in the East that year as well. 2016, 7 out of 8 made it. Boston dropped. 2015, 7 out of 8 made it. Boston dropped out. So Boston both times was a top 8 in the conference when it comes to above 500, which wipes out the whole, that's wins more than losses. So for instance, with Philly right now, they have 61 points in 58 games. They're 3 games above 500. If you don't count overtime losses as losses, and the NHL doesn't, they're 3 games above 500. But Carolina's 9 games above 500. Pittsburgh, also 9 games above 500, potentially going to be 10 today. So when you look at it, this shows that unless you're Boston, you're probably going to stay in the top 8. And Boston right now, they're 8 points clear of missing the playoffs. Technically, because it has to be a team from their own. Well, not necessarily, because if Montreal somehow knocked them out, Montreal's 7 points back, and then they'd have to finish behind both Carolina and Philly. The math's sketchy with that. And what I'm saying is that odds are that doesn't happen. Out west, right now we have Winnipeg with 76 points in 59 games. The Flames have 77 points in 58, whereas San Jose has 77 points in 59. So right now, these are the 2 best teams in the West, San Jose and Calgary. Winnipeg would be the 3rd, although Winnipeg gets top seed because they're top in their division. Unless they face Calgary in the Western Conference Final, they would have home ice throughout the Western Conference part of the playoffs. What's interesting is when you look at the 4 division leaders right now, Winnipeg statistically has the least amount of points per games played. They've played 1 more game than the Islanders. They have the same amount of points. So that's what I'm talking about. Nashville 73. They're 3 points back. They've played 2 extra games. Whereas St. Louis has 2 games in hand on the Jets, but they're 11 points back. They have 4 games in hand on Nashville at this moment because that game between them and Minnesota hasn't started yet, and they're only 8 points back. So if they beat Minnesota today, they're 6 points back with 3 games in hand. It starts to get dodgy pretty quick here for Nashville. Calgary, of course, San Jose, they're pretty safe. Right now, the Vegas Golden Knights, 60 games played, 68 points. So Vegas is pretty safe because they're 9 points above Vancouver. And your wild cards, Dallas, 63 points in 58 games. The Minnesota Wild, 60 points in 58 games. Little dodgy with Minnesota, however, they're 2 games above 500. Arizona's 1 game below, as is Colorado, and Chicago's 2 games below. So if you just take the points part out, you go, okay, how many games over and above below 500 are they? It gets a little simpler to figure it out. And over the last 4 years, there's been one team that's dropped out of the playoffs who's been top 8 every single year. So top 8 in terms of more wins than losses. Again, I'm trying to get rid of the whole who has games in hand on who, and this does it well. The site that I use for this is actually dropyourgloves.com, because I want to, I'm always like, all right, I want to look up on this date who was the number 1 team. Okay. And they have for every single date in the NHL, and I think they have it for almost every other league as well. So it's really kind of a fun site for, hey, who's leading on this date? Oh, look at that. This team got off to a fast start last year too, and the last few years. But anyways, on their site, it shows that teams that had a top 8 record when it comes to being above 500 and dropped out. St. Louis dropped last year, famously. The year before it was the Kings. The year before that it was Colorado, and the year before that it was the Kings again. So the Kings seemingly able to drop out of the playoffs twice. This year, I don't have them on the board right now. They're 8 points out of the playoffs. I had to have a bit of a dividing line. I said, all right, realistically, who's going to get in? Even with Chicago, they have played one more game than Minnesota. They're 3 points back. And the math gets sketchy. I thought about doing the math where, I say, all right, if for instance, Minnesota wins 12 out of their last 24 games, that gives them 84 points. For Chicago to get to 84 points, that's 27 points in 13 games. So that's about, or 13 games, 23 games. That's about 15 wins. It gets tough. It's not that they can't do it. It's just that in this league where there's so many 3-point games, although thankfully there haven't been a whole lot of those lately, and I'm really crossing my fingers there won't be, because I like decisive results. I really do. But it does get tough for them. And then you have to make sure that Colorado, Arizona, and Vancouver aren't able to go on a little bit of a run, which makes it more difficult for Chicago. So there you go. Just a quick look at where we are with the playoffs right now. I understand that there's a game going on, but there's games going on all day. So I'm going to have to pick and choose when I do videos and what the topics are on. But I wanted to take a quick look at where we are. And if you only measure who've had the best records, very often, if you have the best record, you're in. 15 out of 16 last year, I should say. 15 out of 16 the year before. 14 out of 16 the 2 years before that. Very rare that you see teams fall off the map. So if your team's one of the top 8 right now, you got an excellent chance of making the playoffs. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing right through just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.